Russell Westbrook is the single worst three-point shooter in all of basketball. Okay, but you're living in the past if you think he's better than Patrick right now. Well, Patrick should play 30 minutes a game and you'll be better. They should send Russ home. I've been telling you this from the start. If you're not, he's untradeable.
Trading for Russell Westbrook was the dumbest decision in LeBron's career. Even worse than when he pancaked Caruso, which is why he signed with the Bulls. No, I'm kidding. It's actually because they decided to sign Russ instead.
$40 million last year just to stay out the way, and the Russ situation now feels 10 times worse. Unlike John Wall, we're talking about a player that just a year ago averaged a triple-double for damn near 3 different teams, 4 out of the last 5 years with an MVP, and now he's the most unwanted player in the league. The Lakers, as it stands right now, sit extremely uncomfortable with Russell on their roster, and his departure seems imminent.
Fuck, man. I didn't really want to have to make this video, bro, but fuck it. I stand on what I stand on, man. Yo, what's good with y'all, man? Welcome back to the channel, bro. It's Swervo Hoops, and today we ought to be talking about some hoops, man. Y'all see the title, y'all see the thumbnail, y'all see the mood I'm in to start this video, bro. All right, let's get it started, man. We got Russell Westbrook in today's topic, bro, and recently the rumors about him, as if there wasn't enough already, has just been about him coming off the bench this next upcoming season. Rumors started to ramp up a lot more once they made that Patrick Beverley trade, and even more so ever since they brought in Dennis Schroeder. Now, here's the thing, all right? I will say to any new viewers and any viewers that haven't seen my previous video on Westbrook a couple months ago, yes, this man is my favorite player. Now, I'm not a delusional, biased fan. I understand that his game has definitely digressed, you feel what I'm saying? But I did point out in the video, and if you go back to look at the title of that video, I did say it. Russell Westbrook is, you know, the title is very indicative of how the media paints Westbrook ever since he's left OKC. In a sense where he is just this stat chaser who isn't any help to winning games for a competent NBA team, whether that's just a title contender or just a playoff team looking to go deep in the conference. Also did mention in that video that if the Lakers did happen to have a down year or a year that most fans didn't see living up to expectation, a lot of the blame was going to fall on Russell Westbrook. And again, now looking back, you know, I can sit up here and admit that I was wrong, because I did also make the take that they would at least be a conference finals team, and that, you know, obviously this was all under the assumption that they would at least be healthy. But nonetheless, I was wrong. And not only was Russell Westbrook a factor in why this Lakers season was unsuccessful, but he had the worst season of his career. It really shows his effort on defense and just the confusion in his role on offense, the egotistical comments about, you know, how the Lakers were using him when he was receiving the most minutes and the highest usage rate most of the time. Don't get me wrong, I don't think it's Westbrook's complete fault why the Lakers didn't have a successful season last year. With that being said, I do believe he was just thrown in a situation where he expected to play with two of at least the top 20 players in the NBA. And he was made the #1 option on some nights, and some nights he was supposed to be a third option. Some nights he was a second option. The spacing and just the defensive effort from their roster was just atrocious. A matter of confusion on both sides, where Russ was so accustomed to playing a certain play style for most of his career or any team he was on. And also on the organizational perspective, where it's like they've never really had a player like this that was so polarizing and ball dominant since LeBron has gotten there, where it was just difficult to find out a healthy balance playing within the two. And it also didn't help that their 3 best players only got a handful of 21 games to play together. Now, that being said, those 21 games together wasn't really exactly winning basketball. But you could also argue that the role players they had around them really didn't help much, being that they had a whole bunch of old veterans who really weren't going to provide any energy on either side of the floor consistently enough. You'd have to assume it was pretty hard to develop some solid chemistry for this team, as there were so many fresh faces leaving in and out of the lineup or the roster, with the Lakers hoping to make a miraculous signing of a player that would turn around their season at some point. One successful pickup that they had last season was Malik Monk, as he's shown to be a pretty solid floor spacer for them, and also just provided that young player energy you'd want out of a young player with so many old-ass niggas on the team. And Austin Reeves, who was another young player who just hustled on both ends of the floor, very fundamentally sound, and didn't require the ball a lot to be effective on offense. Although they did get rid of Melo, they was hoping to bring back Dwight Howard for another year with the signing of Dennis Schroeder, which would add some much needed versatility on the defensive end for them. On top of that, you have LeBron. You know, he's about to be 38 years old. You feel me? Like, that was probably potentially the last season we're going to see him averaging 30, or at least we hope so he could help preserve himself for the postseason where that matters most. Now, Westbrook's in a position where he has to look into the mirror and see what he can do to help fix his game to help a winning situation, especially being now that he's stuck in a very similar Carmelo Anthony role from a couple years ago, where the league's perspective on him isn't at the highest value right now. Nobody really wants him, and if he does end up getting traded before the season starts or even near the trade deadline, it will most likely be a buyout. And even then, it's like, what team is really going to want him with so many NBA teams being set at point guard nowadays? A lot of the younger players are really good point guards or just guards that teams are looking to build around. You know, a team like Orlando Magic, you have Cole Anthony, Jalen Suggs. And if that team does manage to make an improvement, you would hope it's off the back of their younger players like Franz Wagner or Paolo or Wendell Carter. Even with a team like Indiana, who was heavily rumored in getting Russ, I don't think that they really plan on keeping Russ past a year, if they plan on keeping him at all, because they just recently got Tyrese Halliburton. Russ going to almost any team at this point is going to stunt the growth of some young players. And it doesn't help that the man is getting paid like a top 10 player for the next season. Recently, the Spurs have been the top team to really go after Russ, especially since they have so much salary cap, being that they're rebuilding. I don't think they intend to make him any long-term plans as well. But at the same time, I do feel like, you know, whether they buy him out or not, that is possibly the only team I can see him going to, with the possibility of it having a positive after effect or a happy ending. Obviously, at this point in his career, Russ isn't prime Russ or MVP Russ. But at the same time, I do believe you can put him in a system with competent NBA players and he can get you about 40 wins, maybe a play-in contention. Outside of that, I think that the San Antonio Spurs would actually help polish Westbrook's game in some areas where he's inefficient. I could see Russ going to a team like the Spurs and working on some area of his game within that offense and system that would help transcend and reserve some of the areas of his game that would help him in the later years of his career, or at least make him more of a higher IQ player. Now, don't get me wrong, playing at any stage in the NBA requires some level of high IQ, and we can't forget the season that Russell Westbrook did lead the league in assists. Stat chasing or not, that requires some level of IQ, you feel me? But we can admit Westbrook has some boneheaded plays or decisions, and I do see it hard for me to see him on a team like San Antonio doing some of the dumb shit that he does under the tutelage of Coach Popovich. And it's not to say that, again, we will be seeing some 25 point per game Westbrook again averaging a triple-double. But again, I do believe that San Antonio just has that type of culture where they can have you playing a right style of basketball. And I think we've seen it happen with DeMar DeRozan, where he had a very negative narrative going into San Antonio with the multiple playoff exits from Toronto and not being the best defensive player, not the most willing passer, and also just his drop-off in offensive efficiency in the postseason. Almost as if the narrative was that he was just going to rot away in San Antonio, being on a mediocre team. But meanwhile, that was really where we seen the most polished version of DeRozan, and where he really carved out his decision-making and just becoming an overall better, efficient offensive player and playmaker. His ghost performances in the playoffs still consistent. But that's beside the point. The point is that he went to a less talented team, and yeah, he didn't have the best roster around him, but he came out a much more well-rounded player. Of course, him and DeMar DeRozan's game are drastically different, but I think it's all in the same that they both rely on their athleticism and can also help carve different parts of their game to be better towards success. Now, I do believe that the common weaknesses that they have is obviously their three-point shooting and their consistency on the defensive end, despite having the physical tools to be better on that end. But I do believe it's just their inconsistent effort on that end as well. And I do believe that within a great team defensive system that they can, you know, at least be solid enough perimeter defenders for their respective teams. But at least in Westbrook's case, he doesn't have a knockdown mid-range like DeRozan has, for one. And two, he doesn't really make his free throws at consistent rate like DeRozan does either. Westbrook is arguably the most inefficient star player we've seen in the past decade. And don't get me wrong, it isn't any knock to what he's done in his career, of course. He contributes to other things on the basketball court than what the stat sheet might show from a percentage point. But again, it does come with a handful of turnovers, and he just got to make smarter decisions. And I do feel like that if he gets more of a defined role in an offense, he'll have more of a clear understanding of how he can contribute towards winning once he drops that superstar ego. Now, a critic will say that Westbrook's ego can never be changed. He's too accustomed to this play style for him to ever change, and we witnessed a big portion of that last season. But on the contrary, I view these athletes like humans. Just like how Melo went through a similar situation when it happened in his OKC phase and that whole Houston phase. Eventually, he had to come to terms with putting aside his superstar ego for eventually accepting a role within a team's offense. And especially in today's social media era, if there's a narrative painted about you not being the most willing to change your play style to fit a role, teams will literally not want to give you a contract unless you're just that good, you feel me? These players are human. They have emotions and their minds are able to change on a day-to-day basis. And they got bills to pay like the rest of us. Look, personally, even though Westbrook's my favorite player, I don't know him from a can of paint. But at the same time, I can evaluate him from the same perspective like any other professional athlete, that this is his craft and he works hard at it. And I'm not sitting up here saying that all of them or every athlete goes in with the intention of winning a championship or just being the greatest at the sport, because at the end of the day, it is just a job to some people. But at the same time, to compete at this level, you need an unusual sense of competitiveness to really even make it to the NBA, let alone to actually be great at the sport. Hey man, you can view these athletes like some robots if you want to, but they hear our criticisms, they hear our praises, and they hear both sides of the story. And they are in the gym working towards something. Westbrook, despite what he might say in press, media, etc., I know it sits in the back of his mind of him wanting to win a championship. And he's in the most ideal place to do it. He opted into his player option this previous season, knowing that that is the most amount of money he's going to be sniffing for the rest of his career now at this point. Maybe that, alongside the fact that he can't for certain rebounds, is a reason enough for you to identify him as a selfish player or not a team-first player, especially because he didn't even attempt to take a pay cut. But at the same time, I do believe that Russ wants to win, bro. Like, dude is going into his 13th, 14th year. It's a lot of criticism whether he has an impact on winning. He went to LA, which was his hometown team, and got booed by the home fans himself in certain games. I don't know, call me crazy, but I don't think that he wants to be in a losing situation, especially with the potential of him getting more injuries if he has to carry a heavy load. And relying on athleticism, the man's is going to have to develop some type of perimeter shooting at some point in his career anyways. Might as well do it while you're playing alongside Anthony Davis and LeBron James. You feel me? Now, there are concerns with them saying that they just brought Beverly just to run him out of town. And even with Schroeder, it was a little salt on the wound. You also have Kendrick Nunn coming back next season. And all of these guys are 6'2", 6'3", and below. You feel what I'm saying? So, pretty small lineups coming out of your backcourt. But, again, with Beverly being a stout defender and being able to guard positions 1 through 3, Westbrook, again, being able to hold his own in that if he putting in the effort, and same for LeBron. And again, LeBron James is on the team. He's going to be playing point at times as well. You have Dennis Schroeder, who could be solid on the perimeter defensively. It could be a streaky scorer, whether he's starting or coming off the bench, but can definitely add another layer of shot creation for this roster. Anthony Davis, I mean, hey man, his health. You'd think him playing alongside LeBron would make him a healthier individual in terms of taking care of his physical body, but it hasn't. And, you know, that's just going to remain the question mark, I believe, for the rest of this man's career, to be honest with you. And if he's not healthy, I mean, the chances of this team even being a playoff team is very much up in the air. But again, they got Patrick Beverly, so he's about to save the day. Going back to the lineups and such, with a lot of their additions and young talent being above average floor spacers, you got Lonnie Walker, JTA, Kendrick Nunn, Dennis Schroeder, Thomas Bryant, who may not have the biggest sample size of threes taken in their career, but at the same time, all have proven to be, at the very least, league average perimeter shooters. It isn't just a whole bunch of 30-plus-year-olds on the team that can't really move. We know with Westbrook to push the tempo and get the team running out and breaks. So with this current young roster, you got some fresh legs that will be able to help on that end. Then on top of that, I do believe that him and Patrick Beverley starting in the lineup can be really solid. And in the press conference with Patrick Beverley, he was explaining how some areas on the floor, he'll be able to cater to this starting lineup if he was placed in it with Westbrook. Because, I mean, Beverley really isn't a ball-dominant player. The issue is that Russ is himself, and that's what sparks the conversation with him coming off the bench. And he can use that ball dominance with the second unit and occasionally when he's playing alongside LeBron and he just needs a breather. But at the same time, you don't want it to come within ruining the flow of the offense. You feel me? Westbrook has his moments where he'll try to take his defender off the dribble, and especially with the decline in athleticism, his quick first step isn't as fast. And the explosiveness and the lifts that he had when he would go up for dunks is deteriorating at an accelerating pace. He has moments where he'll just charge into defenders without really having a solid control of the ball, or just not knowing where he is or his teammates is on the floor at times and making the wrong decision or pass. And then you have that atrocious mid-range shooting that he loves to resort to at times. And if he can carve that game of himself out, great. You feel me? Of course, Westbrook is a very strong point guard for his position as well, so he can also bully smaller defenders and also just get to the rim at will. But we also seen in this previous season where it was his worst season finishing at the basket, where we even seen him missing some dunks at times. If we look at his shot chart, he's some level of consistency at being able to shoot at the left corner. And I do believe that if Westbrook can develop a solid hot spot from somewhere around that perimeter, at least where he can be a better catch and shoot player or just be more involved in the offense off the ball than controlling with it, then he can definitely provide some positive for this Lakers team. And whether he's accepting of that bench role or not, it's most likely we're not going to see him in a Lakers jersey for much longer. So he's just going to have to come to terms with changing his play style to suit a team, or to be okay without being on an NBA roster. He's done it all. He's averaged a triple-double multiple seasons. He's won MVP. He's won All-Star MVP. At this point, one of the few things that he's missing off his resume is a championship.
Maybe I'm being too optimistic on Russ. After years of disappointment and expectations, maybe he won't change his play style in hopes of winning his first championship. Or maybe I'm being too pessimistic and pointing out a lot of his flaws that he has in his game. After all, for a point guard to shoot 66% from the line and a point guard who likes to attack the basket at that is crazy.
With LeBron getting older,
Darvin Ham and Russell Westbrook himself have little to no time to really figure out how they're going to make this offense work, where it can contribute towards a successful winning style of basketball.
Jim shooting videos where his form looks like it's changed and he can probably be a competent floor spacer, but now we really got to see it. I really do want to see Westbrook, embrace the new role, or he's going to be seeing himself out of the league, you feel me? And it'd be a sad sight to see. At the end of the day, do I believe he should be benched or start? I personally believe he should start, all right? And I'm not just saying that because the dude is my favorite player, but I do believe that if Westbrook can come to terms with changing up his play style a bit and just playing a bit more off the ball, be a little more willing to set screens and just be a better team defender and at least putting more effort when the ball's not in your hand. Westbrook's a great energy player, and I do believe him and Patrick Beverley on a team just jawing at you on the opponent's side of the end, like, is going to play some mental games on certain opponents for sure. Still don't think he's a bad player. I'm talking about a guy who averaged 18, 7, and 7. As inefficient as that can be, he still has some type of value in the court, being one of the league's better passers, and at the same time, the best rebounder at his position.
Now, don't get me wrong, entertaining the idea of him being a sixth man isn't a bad idea. I'm not saying he's a worse player because of it. If he were to accept that role, I do see him being a spark plug for their offense and running the second unit. I personally would just prefer him to start over the other guard options they have on this team and have Beverley play the two.
That being said though, man, if you guys enjoyed the video, leave a like down below. Subscribe to the channel if you new, man. You feel me? If you brand new, what you doing? Stop acting brand new. And if you ain't new, welcome back. You feel me? It's been Sorbo Hoops talking about some hoops, man. And I'ma holla at y'all, man. Y'all be easy, bro.